This is Irene Finlayson on the 5th of August 2019, interviewing Tim Deeks for the Cheltenham Local History Society's Oral History Project. Tim, can you tell me something about your beginnings in Cheltenham?
Yes, I was born in Cheltenham in 1961. I was actually born at home in Buttermere Close, which is in Up Hatherley. It was on an estate of prefabs, which had been built after the war, and I lived there for the first 2.5 years of my life.
And do you have any memories of the prefabs or...?
One very vague memory, but it was a long time ago, and I was only 2.5 when we left there, and we moved to Brooklyn Road in 1963.
Right. So can you tell me something about your school days?
Yes, I went to Romefield Infants and Junior School, which is based just literally around the corner from where I lived in Brooklyn Road. I was there 65 to 72, and I then went to Cheltenham Bournside School, and we were the first ever intake there in 1972 for what was a brand new school, and B was there was the first comprehensive school in Cheltenham.
Oh, right, that's interesting. So up till then there had just been a grammar school and secondary modern?
Well, in Cheltenham you had the grammar school, you had the boys' grammar school and a girls' grammar school, which were on separate sites in Cheltenham, and also you had a number of secondary modern schools around the town, but also the other school in Cheltenham was the technical high school, which shared facilities with Bournside from 1972 onwards.
Oh, right.
So they shut Cheltenham Technical High School and moved all these students from years 2 to the upper 6 to the Bournside campus. Right. But we were the first intake in 72, and we were the first comprehensive year. Right. So most of the teachers had transferred over from the technical high school.
Were you very aware of being in a new school and a new kind of setup?
Very much so, because we knew the history of the technical high school, where some of my cousins and friends had been students. And prior to being called the technical high school, it was called the Central School, the back sort of between around the Second World War time. My mother actually went to the Central School, and that was based in Gloucester Road in Cheltenham. And it's now some houses and flats, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Yes, but it was a brand new school. They hadn't finished building all of it, so we did have to go to the technical high school in the first term for some of the lessons. Things like science and physical education, because they hadn't finished building the science block, and they hadn't finished building the sports hall and the gymnasium.
And as a pupil, did you think the facilities were good? Did you?
Yes, it was a brand new school. Had a very fresh feel to everything. For example, there was thing like a language laboratory there, which probably very new at the time. I would have thought. But when they did, the science blocks and all were finished. It was around about the Christmas time, if I recall, in the first year, we had some very good facilities for a brand new school. I think it was a bit of a learning curve for the teachers. The headmasters. It was a new thing. But also amalgamating the old technical high pupils with the comprehensive pupils. So in the first 1 or 2 years, we were probably all put in classes, and it took a bit of time to sift out.
Yes.
Where were people going to go? So eventually they split you into sort of 4 streams, basically. So the top grade would have been people that probably normally would have gone to the grammar schools. I was in the second stream, which was more suited to people that were more into technical studies. And there were the people below that would have gone to the old secondary modern schools like Hull or Monkscroft, Cleve or John King's.
Yes. It's possibly difficult as a pupil to judge this, but did you think it worked? Did you?
I think it was a big learning curve for everyone at the time, and it was in the early days of comprehensive education in this country. So yes, it probably did. It took a little bit of work, and perhaps 1 or 2 people ended up should have done a bit better maybe. Perhaps they weren't putting the right streams in subsequent years.
Yeah. It's always difficult when people are that age, because people mature differently. So
that's right.
Some are ready for some things and others not till a bit later.
Yeah,
so that is hard.
Yeah.
Did any teachers stand out?
Yes, funny enough, I'm still in touch with some of the teachers now.
Really?
Yes. For example, Paddy Murphy, who was head of the PE department, I still see him on most months. I was a big fan of playing and watching sport back then, and still am now, and always remember some of the teachers there that were very good to us when we were quite young kids, really. I thought we were very welcoming.
Good.
Mr. Powell, who was my housemaster, I still bump into him from time to time. One or two of the other teachers still, so it's quite nice to still see these people around the town and still involved with sport as well.
Was it at Bournside that you first became involved with different sports?
Yes, I played at junior school. I played some sort of football and athletics, but when we went to senior school, it gave us the opportunity to play other sports like rugby, better quality cricket, athletics, various other games like badminton, tennis, hockey even. But it was for myself. I was very pleased with the facilities that were available. Like again, when we first went there, we just had a gym, but in subsequent years they built a sports hall, multi-use sports hall there as well. So the facilities did improve all the time that I was at the school. Between 72 to 79, I stayed on, did the sixth form between 77 and 79, and still in touch with an awful lot of ex-pupils even today.
That's very good, because that doesn't always happen nowadays, does it? As people move around, so that all sounds a very positive experience. Did you feel that Bournside equipped you well for what you then went on to do later?
Yes, I was more from the sort of technical side of things. I would say technical studies, so I did things like woodwork and technical drawing, which sort of did lead me into a career in the construction industry eventually.
Yes, you chose to study full time after school, did you?
Yes, I wasn't 100% sure when I got to 18, and some of my friends went away to university, but I was a bit unsure what to do. So I decided to go to what at the time was called the North Gloucestershire College of Technology, which was based in the park, but I was actually based at the building division, which was in Lansdowne Road, literally a stone's throw from here, in the building called the Lippias, which is still there now, but is used as various office accommodation.
Right.
Yeah, so that was a specialist building department that did anything from day release for apprentices in trades. I actually went into the Higher National Diploma in Construction course, and that was a 2-year full-time course, which I did between 79 and 81. At the time we were at the college, although it was originally, as I said, it was called the North Gloucestershire College of Technology, in the time we were there, they'd actually changed the name to Gloucestershire College of Arts and Technology.
Yes.
GLOSCAT.
Yes. I think that's what it was when I first came to Cheltenham. It was called GLOSCAT. Yes, and I can see where it was in the park as well. I can remember where the building was.
No, it's big housing estate there now.
Did you feel it was a good place to be a student?
Yes, it was. It was fairly well established. College of higher education. You know, it wasn't a university, it wasn't a polytechnic, but it did have a wide range of students there. Anyone from sort of things like doing perhaps apprenticeship, day release, through to full-time courses such as catering, hotel management. A wide range. Right. I think people could take A-levels there as well, if I recall.
Yeah.
It was a typical college of that sort of era, really, sort of 70s type era, before other colleges became polytechnics and universities.
And what was it like to be a student there? Did you feel there was sufficient activities outside of the academic?
Yeah, because I was born and lived in Cheltenham all my life, I was quite happy to lead the sort of life I'd perhaps led for many years, with all the facilities, friendships.
Yeah.
But sort of, bolstered somewhat by the extra opportunities and clubs and what have you that the college actually provided.
Did you feel you had a typical student social life?
Very much so, yes. I was. I've always been very involved with social life in Cheltenham. Back then it was the usual pub crawls.
Was it?
Nightclubs.
Were there many nightclubs in Cheltenham?
Back then there was probably 3 or 4.
Right.
We used to go to one called the Night Owl, which was in the High Street. And funny enough, it was only in the news last week, you may have heard, where originally back in the mid-60s, it was called the Blue Moon Club. And they did a big article in the local press and the local radio where they've now unveiled a blue plaque outside this building in the High Street, where back in the mid-60s it was the first club of its type, where a lot of people that went on to be very famous musicians played some of their first concerts. People like The Who, Jimi Hendrix, David Bowie, a number of people of that ilk all started back in that era, back in the mid-60s, playing at the Blue Moon Club in Cheltenham.
Did you ever see anyone famous there?
Not personally, but there were bands that did come to other places around the town back in that era. The Town Hall was one of the major concert venues on the sort of gig circuit. They used to put bands on at the college. They used to get some of the more well-known names at the college where I was at the time. Various other small venues around the town perhaps didn't have the bigger concert hall facilities that other towns around the country had. I always felt that was a bit sort of restricting for a lot of people. So often if we wanted to go to concerts, we'd go to something like Bristol Colston Hall or the Birmingham Odeon, places of that size, which was quite common. You'd often see people going off on the trains in the evenings to their concerts. A lot of people of similar age, back at 18, 19, 20, 21 age group.
I think it's still pretty much the same, really. People still go to Birmingham and Bristol for
very much
the bigger acts,
yes,
don't they?
That's right,
They do get a fair number at the Town Hall, but perhaps the big names you have to go a bit further afield. I think you, talking about music, I believe your dad was very much involved in
That's right, very
music.
much so. He my father was born in 1923. He left at the end of the Second World War. He had a short spell in the Navy, but his real love in life was playing the drums from an early age. He loved playing the drums, and he managed to, after the war, he did actually spend about a year as a professional musician in Jersey, playing in these sort of typical bands of that era, like the big band, swing, jazz bands of that era. Decided to come back to Cheltenham. He actually started work at Doughty's in Isle Court in Cheltenham. But his real love was playing the drums, and for the next probably best of 40 years he played with a number of bands in Cheltenham, typically the sort of dinner dance type circuit. Concerts at the Town Hall, Saturday night dances, weddings, receptions, all sorts. But played with a number of musicians all around Cheltenham.
Oh my goodness!
So some pictures there of my father, and I think that's one there from the mid-50s, where he's playing with a group called the Rockets. Some of these musicians, as far as I know, are still around the town. And there was like many towns at that time, there was a very vibrant live music scene. This was pre-disco era. This is typical of the era where people would go out on a Saturday night to a dance, and he was very much part of that scene.
It sounds as though he didn't have much trouble finding work then.
No, there was plenty of work around in that era. There was lots going on around, not only locally but further afield, where the bands he played in would regularly probably travel anything up to 40-50 miles on more than one night a week to undertake a booking. Yes. I had some of his old diaries, and I was quite surprised how far they used to travel. Places like Ross-on-Wye and Wootton Bassett, all sorts of places really.
Were you aware that your dad was a bit different from other dads in this?
Yeah, I didn't know any. I didn't have any friends or know anyone that's fathers were a musician. I do remember my father was often out in the evenings playing in the bands. He was certainly out probably most Fridays and Saturdays, but that's how it was in that era. There was an awful lot of live music going on.
Did you ever have the chance to listen to him?
Yes, not a great deal, because obviously I was only fairly young at the time, and we didn't often get the opportunity to. But I remember the band he played at the time, back in the mid-70s, a group called the Peter Lee Four. They were quite well known locally at the time. And they had the Saturday night residency, firstly at the Carlton Hotel in the early 70s, and then they moved to the brand new Golden Valley Hotel by the roundabout at the end of the A40. And they had the residency there for a few years. And I remember going to see them spend one New Year's Eve there on the old New Year's Eve dinner and dance. It was good fun.
Yeah, that's excellent. Were you impressed? Did you think, gosh, that's my dad?
Well, they were probably a bit amused there. They were trying to, they were, back then, I suppose my father, even by then, he would have been in his early 50s. Mm. But they were still trying to play the pop hits of that actual era. So it was a mix.
Yes. A mix. Which one was the Carlton Hotel now? Is that the one?
Carlton Hotel is, no, it's, what do they call it?
The hotel, it's not the Malmaison?
Hotel du Vin.
Hotel
du Vin.
Hotel du Vin, yes. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So just off Base Hill Road.
That's the one at Base Hill Road, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And going back to in your family history, Tim, were your grandparents local as well?
Yes, very much so. My mother's father was a Bristolian, but moved to Cheltenham in the early 1920s. He was a Bristolian, as I said, but I think that was in there was a recession on back then, the tough times then, and he actually moved to Cheltenham to start up a window cleaning business, Fluke's window cleaning, that were well known around the town for many years afterwards. He moved up in that era, and my mother was born in Tennyson Road in 1930, which is part of what they call the Poets Estate, where all the road names are named after poets.
Yes.
So Tennyson Road, Shakespeare Road, Milton Road, etc.
Yeah.
And she lived there till about 1950, until she got married to my father. My father's side of the family, my father's parents were originally from Suffolk and from Worcestershire, but my father's parents moved to Cheltenham in the early, perhaps somewhere around about 1920 or maybe earlier than that. My father's father, originally, he was, amongst various jobs he did, he was actually the chauffeur for I'm sure if it was Mr. Lee or Mr. Perrins of Lee and Perrins sauce fame.
So there were actually a Mr. Lee and a Mr. Perrins.
There was a Lee and Mr. Perrins, and he was the chauffeur.
Right.
So he was involved in motor vehicles in various roles over the years. Eventually he got a job at Black and White Coaches, which were based in St. Margaret's Road in Cheltenham. And my grandfather was also very good. He was a very good artist and a commercial model maker as well. Commercial artist and model maker. And he sort of designed the posters and such things for the advertising for Black and White Coaches.
Right.
He was also a fairly well-known sort of artist of horse scenes and the race course and that sort of thing. Even the hunt.
Yes.
He just liked painting horses.
Yes.
But he also made commercial models as well. He was involved in model making. He made models of things like circuses and things like that.
Oh, goodness.
And I've got a flyer here from 1935 where he produced a model of I think they're called dioramas, they were called, and he made a working model of a circus. He did other things, and he actually did end up on a Pathé newsreel in the 1950s, and that Pathé newsreel is available on the internet. And it's very interesting in viewing, actually.
Yes.
Yes.
That's fascinating.
Yes.
Yes. But were you aware when you were a child that your grandfather did all this?
Very much so. Yes, he was. When we used to visit, they lived in Oral Road, and whenever we went there, he was always painting. He was always making models, doing this, trying this, experimenting with that. And he made me some toys and various things when I was a child. And, cherished memories of those days.
That's lovely. Do you still have any of those, or
unfortunately, very little of the stuff has survived over the years of that side, I'm afraid. Again, like my father, there's no recordings at all of any of his music, but I think that was just the way it was in that age. There's probably a lot of sort of amateur or semi-professional musicians probably didn't ever go to that.
No, and then people didn't think to do it then either, did they? They didn't think
right.
of having these things for later.
But, it's fond memories of grandparents. And going back to my mother's father, he was heavily involved with local sport, and he did eventually end up as the chairman and president of Hadley and Reading's Cricket Club, who were one of the major club sides back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And he had very close relationships with them. And his son, my mother's brother, eventually became club captain there as well, back in the 60s and 70s. And I did play for Hadley Readings as a junior myself. Back in that time.
Yes, you're quite a well-known family then in some ways.
Yeah, the Fluke family were Fluke family were quite well known in Cheltenham because not only for their interest in sport, but also the window cleaning business was a fairly big business in Cheltenham, where they had like the main contracts to do things like Marks and Spencers and High Street, and they had those contracts for many years. Very much so, yes.
That was a good idea your grandfather had then to set
That's
up,
right,
yes,
it was.
It obviously became a flourishing business.
That's right, yes.
Do you think you inherited a bit of your construction interest from your grandfather who made the models? And
yeah, possibly, yes. I've never really thought of it that way, but yes, it's... it seems a long time ago now. 40 years ago.
you left Cheltenham, of course, to continue your studies in Nottingham?
That's right. I went to, as I said, I went to the Technical College in Cheltenham, did a 2-year higher national diploma in construction. Decided there was another course available at Trent Polytechnic in Nottingham, and did a 1-year diploma in construction management, which I enjoyed. The challenge of living away from Cheltenham for the first time in my life. But only did the 1-year course there, enjoyed that, but then decided I'd wanted to come back to Cheltenham to find employment.
And did Cheltenham offer reasonable opportunities in that line?
Yes, unfortunately when I finished college in 81, it was one of the dreaded downturns in the industry, which has been a common occurrence for myself over the last
It is an industry like that, isn't it?
That sort of thing is why my grandfather came to Cheltenham back in the 1920s.
Yes.
But, so I was happy to come back to Cheltenham because it was my hometown. I'd lived in Cheltenham all my life. All my friends, most of my friends were still living in Cheltenham. I was very heavily involved with social life and sport in Cheltenham, and I've continued that to this day.
And was it quite easy to pick up your social life and your sport?
Yes, very much so. Not many of my friends at that time actually went away to university and stayed away. Most of them had either stayed in Cheltenham or had been away but did then move back to Cheltenham.
Yes.
I was still involved with the sports, cricket and what have you that I'd been involved with before I went, so there was no massive changes really when I came back after a year away.
Right. And was it quite easy to join clubs?
Yes, I personally was mainly involved with cricket, and there was many cricket teams in Cheltenham back in that era. I might have mentioned before. I think we worked out recently that in one time there was over 32 different cricket club sides in Cheltenham, and we're now down to about probably half a dozen.
Yes.
So that's one of the big changes that. Cricket as a recreational sport. Cricket's still a popular game in this country, but nowhere near the amount of people playing cricket.
Have you any thoughts on why that is?
Changing times. I think a big part of it is people have no longer got the time to give up the best part of a day to play a club sport of that type. Although back then, we often used to play Saturday and Sunday, and we used to play once or twice in the evenings during the week as well. And it was quite a buoyant sort of atmosphere amongst all the teams in the town. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone still knows everyone now. Only the week before last I was at the Cheltenham Cricket Festival at the Gentlemen's College, and it's amazing number of people you still bump into when you go there that you knew from many a year back, and there's still lots of stories told of games from years gone by. So good camaraderie amongst the sports folk in Cheltenham.
Was there anything you would like to have taken up sports-wise that wasn't available in Cheltenham?
I was quite keen from a fairly early age. I started playing golf in the mid-70s. Firstly up at the pitch and putt course at Pittville Park, and then we progressed to playing 18-hole golf on top of Cleve Hill, the Cleve Hill Golf Club. It wasn't easy for younger people that weren't connected in that era to actually join a golf club. So when Cleve Hill became available after the original Cotswold Hills Golf Club moved from Cleve Hill in 1976 and moved to their own land up at Ullenwood, the opportunities became easier for more ordinary people perhaps to play golf.
Yes.
And as it worked out, 20 years later, I did join Cotswold Hills Golf Club up in Ullenwood, and I've been a member for 23 years now.
Oh well, so you weren't restricted in the long run by any lack of facilities for that. Yes.
No, there's more golf courses around.
Yes.
Back then there was only probably 2 proper golf courses in the vicinity. You probably now got a choice within a 20-mile radius. You probably got a choice of 7 or 8 courses.
Yes. And I don't think waiting lists are the same problem they used
to
be.
No, again, when I put my name down for Cotswold Hills in 1990, and it took me till 96 to actually get in as a member, and that was quite normal in that era. Golf went through a boom time in the 80s. People were a bit more affluent. More people had the opportunity to play golf, more facilities, more leisure time, maybe. People giving up cricket and playing golf, which is quite common. There were a lot of ex-cricketers that became golfers, and there still is now.
Yes. Well, you certainly hear about that with the professional cricketers, don't you? A lot of them have golf as one of their main recreational sports. So yes. Yeah. So, having lived really in Cheltenham most of your life, Tim, are there any particular changes that you've noticed over that time that are either good or bad? Or?
Well, I think the general fabric of the town is mainly unchanged from those days. Perhaps we've lost a lot of very good buildings that were demolished in the 60s and 70s. It sure has been a bit of a bone of contention, I think, for a lot of Cheltonians. Various traffic schemes have been tried over many years, but there obviously is a major problem with traffic in Cheltenham. I know that one of the major reasons is we haven't got a ring road around the town, and because of the sort of area we live in with the hills and what have you, it's always going to be a major issue that they can't put a ring road in. So the traffic problem is an issue in town, and it's ongoing.
Yes.
But generally, there's not masses of change in Cheltenham. A lot of the things like the public houses are still there. There's still good atmosphere around the town. Obviously become a lot more cosmopolitan over time.
Yes.
Perhaps more students around. It's become more of a student sort of town. There's more colleges, bigger colleges around the town now. They've increased capacity over the years. I don't think the town has changed massively as a sort of town of its size in England and Britain. And
you're obviously still very happy to live here?
Yes, never had any intention of moving away from Cheltenham ever. Always been happy. The town gives everything that myself and my wife would ever want in the way of facilities. And also being on the footstep of such glorious countryside throughout Gloucestershire and beyond, which is only 5-10 minute drive out the town. You're out in the wilds.
Well, that's a very positive note on which to end, Tim, and thank you very much for sharing your memories with us.